Yeah, I've been doing podcasts since 2015, 2016.
Whoa.
But and it's just completely hit or miss. Some days I come in here and I'm not nervous at all, and other days I'm a nervous wreck and sweating the whole time. It just kind of hit
Yeah.
and miss, which I've built the whole platform on mental health
Hmm.
mostly.
Hmm.
But the deeper I got into that, the more I saw all of the interconnectedness of all of the various modes of healing. So you
Hmm.
have, we focus on mental health, but, and when I say we, I don't mean the podcast, I mean like just society and culture goes, okay, mental health means you need to, meditate.
Meditate. I was just thinking, yeah,
Stability
mindfulness.
and yeah,
Yeah.
mindfulness, stuff like that. But mental health is interconnected to physical health, which is
Hmm.
interconnected to the health of your environment, your monetary availability and stability, your relationships. So it's expanded and
Hmm.
evolved to encompass all of these things. But I really appreciate you coming on today and
Well, thank
doing
you.
this with us.
I'm really happy to be here. And like I said before you hit record, you guide the conversation, and I am happy to talk in any direction that you want, relating to my experience, of course, and that I wrote about in my book.
Yeah, and that's how it should be. Is just like you were saying earlier, every podcast has its own format of how it does things, and some of them are really strict and they have all of these questions. I have guests all the time want me to email them the questions that I plan to ask them beforehand. And I'm like, I don't do that. I just kind of like show up as myself, whoever I am today. And I hope
Hmm.
that the guest does the same exact thing. But the thing with being new to podcasting is it's actually quite a beautiful thing. It's raw and it's real because you don't know what to expect. And the people who have been doing it for a really long time, they have this script in their head, so they just kind of fall into character. I had this guy a couple of weeks ago when we first got on the call, I was like, oh, this is going to be so much fun. He's so chill. He's so cool.
Hmm.
This is
Hmm.
going to be so much fun. As soon as I hit record, his demeanor shifted into like lawyer, political, straight face. And I'm like, oh man. And then as
Yeah,
soon as we
that's the.
cut off the recording, he went right back into his interesting stuff. I was like, man, so that's a beautiful point to like just kind of tell people like, you just show up as yourself as whoever you are today, and it's good enough. It is
Hmm.
absolutely always good enough. People can tell when you're putting on a show.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is so, Carrying the Tiger is my first book, and I'm not young. I mean, like I'm already retired from my normal life, career life before this all happened to me. So I've never, just this last few weeks is when I finally started doing a little bit of publicity for the book, which is launching like right now. And I'd never done podcasts before. And the first couple I went to, I had these questions that my PR agent had sent out, like,
Uh-huh.
here are questions in case you, the host, don't know what you want to ask, and Tony can talk about these. And I got all prepped, and I was really nervous. And after three or four of these conversations, I discovered that no, exactly what you're talking about. It goes best for you and for me, and I hope for the listeners. If we just follow this thing and we go where you want to take it, because it's your show and your vibe, and you've got listeners who come in expecting to hear interesting conversations. So I'm up for it. Here we go.
Yeah, so the book is about you and your journey with your wife and
Yes.
losing her to cancer.
Yes.
Very heavy stuff.
It is very heavy stuff. I hope that reading the book is not as heavy an experience as simply describing it is. Otherwise, very few people will ever read the book. I want to. The book is Carrying the Tiger, but the subtitle is equally important
Yes.
because it lays out exactly what the journey is. And I really wanted this right on the cover. So, Carrying the Tiger, Living with Cancer, Dying with Grace, Finding Joy While Grieving, which is the journey I went through. It covers about 8 years of my life. Um, and It is more or less what it says. The first part of it starts on the day that we learned that Lynn, my wife was Lynn, was her name. We learned that Lynn had tumors that no one had expected in her lung and her spine. It was already stage 4 cancer by the time we knew she had cancer. And they they said, 6 months, 2 years, it's in that kind of frame. We were very, very lucky that we had more time than that, had some twists and turns, and it's all described in the book, but we got into a clinical trial. It's funny, I always say we. And someone once stopped me and said, Tony, it was your wife's cancer, but it was like the two of us joined at the hip, holding hands through this whole process. And I thought of it as we. She got into a clinical trial that extended her life 4 or 5 years, but all kinds of other things went wrong. So that's part one of the book is like emotionally as well as physically learning to live with incurable cancer and the drugs that in her case we took. I mean, everyone takes different, everyone's treatment for cancer is different. Her story is her story and my story. But there were drugs, there were operations that went wrong, there were lots of twists and turns, and then there were several wonderful good years where we kind of had the best of it, where we had adjusted to having this death sentence hanging over her.
Yeah.
But it wasn't happening now, and the sort of the side benefit of that is you really do, like the grass gets greener, the flowers get more vibrant. You really appreciate what you've got because you know there's a time limit on it. We've all got time limits on our lives, but we don't go through life thinking that way.
We don't think about it, no.
No. Then eventually the cancer did beat the drugs, as they had told us from the get-go that it would eventually happen. It was just a question of time. And we had a very hard 6 months or a year as the tumors started to grow. We tried various things. No one could stop them. This is as if this could have happened right at the beginning if we hadn't had that good luck. This is what often happens when you have stage 4 cancer. They try things, you do chemo, you do whatever, and it doesn't work, and you die in like a year.
Hmm.
Well, that's when our year happened. But at the end of it, and all that time, we didn't think she was dying. We were just like, can we find another treatment? Can we get some more years? And then we finally reached the point of deciding enough is enough. Actually, I should say, with help from a wonderful, caring physician who said, sometimes you have to say enough is enough, and maybe now is that time. At a critical moment in our lives, Lynn said yes. We stopped treatment. We did home hospice for a couple of weeks. It was only a few weeks. And then she died. And those were two of the most beautiful weeks of my life. The two most beautiful weeks of my life. And that's right in the heart of the book. That's the dying with grace. And even though it was only 2 weeks, I consider it the emotional heart of the book. And I'm happy to talk about that. And then after that, I had part 3 of the book is finding joy while grieving. I had naively thought that because Lynn's death was kind of as good as it gets, meaning she was with me, we managed to do home hospice, she wasn't in a lot of extra pain, we talked to each other. We talked about what it would be like for her to die. Not that we had any answers. We're not religious, I should say. I mean, we're both kind of spiritual. So we don't say, oh, it just goes black and there's nothing. Well, we don't know, but we don't have the answers. We talked about that. She asked me what was going to happen to me afterwards. She gave me permission to have another relationship after she was gone. You can't ask for more than that as a spouse, losing your beloved partner. And so I naively thought, oh, this grief, I'm going to grieve, but maybe it'll be shorter, maybe it'll be shallower, maybe I'll dodge a bullet here. And oh my God, it does not work like that, or it did not work like that for me. So I got plunged into deep grief, and I wrote about that. And the last part of the book is sort of coming out of that and then meeting someone else through grief, sharing stories about our grief. She was 1,000 miles away. It's a series of coincidences that caused us to meet and start these conversations, but we became very attracted to each other. And I started having a relationship with her while I was still deeply grieving Lynn. I mean, it was just a few months, which a lot of our friends didn't understand. I didn't understand it. I felt incredibly conflicted and guilty and stuff. And then slowly we found our way forward with a lot of ups and downs. And although other things happen in the last part of the book, that's the through line for the last part of the book is finding my way to be able to have a new love relationship while holding on to my grief and my love for Lynn at the same time, which was completely not easy. So that's the book. It's a lot. And so far, I should say, as we record this interview, it's in pre-release. It's had the early sort of advance reviews and stuff, and they've been wonderful. And I've got my early readers, some of whom have said, "Wow, Tony, this book really helped me a lot." So
What's the release
fingers
date?
crossed.
What's the release date?
The release date is April 29th.
Okay, so it'll be out by the time this comes out.
Yeah, that's what I kind of assumed. So,
Yeah.
but I've as we talk here, I've got my fingers crossed. Like I don't know if this book will be read by 300 of my closest friends and about 10 other people, or if this book will actually be read by many hundreds or thousands of people. I wrote the book to help other people, and so I
And
mean,
I'm
and that's
sure it
why I'm
helped
having,
you a lot.
oh, it helped me tremendously.
Yeah.
It
It's
helped
kind
me
of like
tremendously.
journaling,
Well, this
getting
is the
it all
thing. The whole story of how this came about is like an accident that came out of a kind of journaling. Have you heard of Caring Bridge? CaringBridge.org?
No.
Caring Bridge is a nonprofit organization and website. So caringbridge.org. So there's no advertising. It's entirely donation funded, and it's a website which is like a stripped down Facebook sort of thing, social media thing, where you can set up a site when you are going through health challenges or when you need support from your friends. You can set up a site and you can make it public, semi-public, or as we did, private. And private meant that only the people you whitelist, their email addresses, can access your site. So Lynn had a lot of friends. And like the day that that we got this horrible phone call, this devastating phone call that with these tumors, she started wanting to tell her friends, and she wrote some emails, and the emails started flying back and forth. And at this point, we were like launching into the whirlwind, the maelstrom of when you first have a diagnosis like this, you go from one doctor to another, and they refer you somewhere else, and all this stuff was happening. We couldn't deal with all these emails.
Mm-hmm.
So a friend told us about Caring Bridge and said, you can just post your updates there, and we will all read them in our own time, and then we can write comments back.
Perfect.
And that's what we did, starting on about day 4. And it was started out as a factual thing. And Lynn asked me to write them. She was perfectly happy to talk to her friends about cancer. She obviously wasn't keeping it a secret from her friends. That didn't occur to her. And thank goodness it didn't, because none of this story would have worked out this way if she had just told like 4 people or 10. But we got in the habit that I would write a post like, oh, we went to the doctor today and this is what they said and this is what's going to happen tomorrow. And they started out factual like that. And Lynn would review the posts. And in the early, when we were dealing with like messy side effects like diarrhea or constipation, which all of which happened to her, or pain, major amounts of pain, she had me trim them out of the post. Like, there's a limit. I want people to know I'm going through this, but I don't want them to feel sorry for me. I don't want them to go, ugh. I don't want to be like wallowing in self-pity or sound like that.
And
So we
that's
got
why a
in this
lot of
habit.
people hide it. But I feel like hiding it, even though I understand wanting to like not be the victim and not have people treat you differently, and you need that community. You need the people around you. You need to see them. You need to give them the opportunity to help you.
Yes. This, and that's the biggest, but it's only even, it was even more than that. So just in the beginning part, in that first year or two, we're writing these posts, everything you just said. I mean, the people responding back, Lynn and I would sit there and refresh the screen. We'd put up a post, and about 5 minutes later, we'd start refreshing the screen because this was 10 years ago. It didn't auto refresh at the time when new comments came in. And the comments would start to appear because there was like a push notification thing. People would get an email, and
Mhm.
some of them would immediately go look at the post. And it gave us so much strength and joy. Just these little simple things like I'm with you and fingers crossed and I love you and oh, that sounds hard. And then over time, we started getting comments that were actually really useful, inspiring suggestions, help. People have been down this road before. And they would tell us stuff about the drugs she was taking. Oh, when I did this, I did so and so. About when Lynn had hospital delirium, which is scary as anything, and no one had told me that it was coming. And I'm worried she's losing her mind. She's worried that she's losing her mind. One of our friends writes, "Oh yeah, when I was in the hospital, like the third time she had a major condition, I imagined this, that, and the other. I thought my doctor's kids were running down the hall. It just gave us so much sort of peace and support." And then the other layer, two more layers on top of that from writing all these posts. One of them was because we were putting all of these posts, all this information out there in a push way, when Lynn actually was in a conversation with her friends, they didn't ask this stuff.
Mm.
They might, yes, if they asked, Lynn would talk, but they could talk about other things. They didn't need to have the very first question be, "How are you doing?" and go into a conversation about her cancer because
Mhm.
they knew it from reading it the night before.
Yeah.
And this made her interactions with her friends much more like what they had always been, which is exactly what she wanted.
Yeah.
And then the final huge thing for me, these things became my therapy.
Yeah.
They started factual, but I wrote these posts for years. And after not too long, just a few months, I was putting in how we felt and what it felt like to go through the day when you're living with a terminal diagnosis and how scared we were today and whatever. And it became my single biggest therapy outlet, which was especially noticeable when we went into hospice and Lynn was no longer able to help write these things or look over my shoulder in those last few weeks of her life. And then after she died, this was the Lynn Catula journal that just happened to have been written by me. That's how I always thought of it. I'm telling our friends about Lynn, and then she died. And I wrote a post saying, I guess that's it. Lynn died, basically. I'm going to try and go on with my life. Good luck to everyone. I didn't actually say that. I can't remember what I said, but I basically wrote a goodbye post. And 2 days later, I couldn't help myself. I wrote a post basically saying, I'm in agony here. The days feel horrible. And I started journaling every day, letting out what that day had felt like. And that at that point, the thing had transitioned from just telling my friends facts 5, 8 years earlier to my personal spilling out of the emotions that I'm going through, trying to deal with all of this deep grief, which became a treasure trove years later when I went back and looked at it. And I had this journaling. I had never done journaling in my life, but there it was. And also letting out those emotions. It was as if I were in a grief group. I should say I did also have a therapist at the time, who I was seeing, and then I started that because of this whole journey. But on top of my weekly conversations with my therapist, I was every night as if I were in a grief group, and it had been my turn to talk where no one would interrupt you, which is kind of a common part of group meetings. This was my turn. And I sometimes would write 2 pages about what the day was like. And I just spilled it all out and I got to say it. If anything helped me climb out of my grief faster than I might have otherwise, it would be that journaling, which I kept doing for the next 4 years. But for the next 6 months, it was still really intense. A lot of posts. And then as I started to feel a little better, they got further apart, which you can just track that and say, oh, look, it's obviously less important to him now
Hmm.
because he's not writing as often. It's feeling a little better.
Yeah. I'm a huge advocate for journaling. It sounds cliche at this point because all of the therapists suggest it, all of the coaches, all of the personal development and growth, and all of the things, healing, whatever. Um, but it's so important to process those emotions and find an outlet for them. And writing words worked for me also. That was my thing. And
Hmm.
for some people that might not be their thing. They may get it out in verbally. They
Yes.
may be able to get it out through music or
Hmm.
art. Or I saw your Lynn painted.
Yes.
So that was her outlet, I'm sure.
Totally.
Yeah. So
Totally.
Just finding something that works for you is an ability to process these emotions because they're so big. They're grief is all of reality crushing down on us. And
I like
I've
that.
also heard that grief is love persevering.
Hmm.
Uh, but, you know, the reality of life and being a human is so unbelievably painful at its core. And stuff, it takes stuff like this to, we don't, because you're right, we don't, coming back full circle to what we said earlier, is that we all have this death sentence hanging above our heads. We
Right.
disassociate and
Hmm.
avoid it and pretend it's not there, you know, oh, that's too heavy for me. I'd like to keep it lighter, please. But
Yes.
and then our society and culture kind of hides death away. You know, we don't
Yeah.
there's we people don't want to talk about it. People want to even like with stuff like this, there's people who most people would avoid the conversation of it because they don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to make you
Yes.
feel weird. They don't want to make you feel bad. They want to try to make you smile. They want to avoid it. They want to, and that's not really helpful either. So processing it a little bit at a time helps to, you know, transition you into it, but it really doesn't also. We've talked before, you know, losing someone slowly or losing someone suddenly,
Hmm.
they're both terrible in different ways.
In different ways. I had the slow experience. I
Mhm.
had, I started, Lynn and I started mourning, grieving the loss of our life, or the life we had had, the night of that first phone
Sure,
call. We
sure.
had an incredibly emotional conversation that night. We said, I love you to each other more than we had. I really believe this, more than we had in our entire marriage. That's because we were pretty unromantic. We called each other best friends, but we didn't do Valentine's Day. We did a lot of trips together, loved each other a lot, but we just didn't say it. And the night that we got that phone call, we started saying it to each other like a lot. And it carried with me all the way through. But I had 7 or 8 years, whatever it was, to prepare for her death, 7 years. And still, if anything, I'm going to say still, it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Sure.
If anything, everyone's grief is their own. Every grief is different. I've been taking a course to become a certified grief educator from the
Oh,
great David Kessler, who runs grief.com, which is a wonderful resource, one of several wonderful resources for people who are grieving. But anyway, I've been taking this course now as a result of writing the book and then having these conversations. And he makes it really clear. Everyone's grief is different.
mm,
Everyone grieves in their own way. Don't try and project your expectations onto someone else's grief.
mm-hmm.
But I certainly, before ever taking this course, wrote about what I was finding in my grief. And I was finding that the depth of my grief, if anything, was related to the depth of my love.
Mm-hmm.
What you're grieving, even when it's not about a death, most grief, I would say all, but I'm not, I haven't finished the course yet. But I tend to think that all grief is in some way, you're grieving the loss of something. So it may be the loss of, in the case of, say, a divorce, an unhappy divorce, it may be the loss of the future you had imagined.
Yeah.
It's both the loss of the marriage, sure, but the thing that really gets you is the loss of the future you had imagined.
Mm-hmm.
That's certainly what got me. And damn it, it happens even when you've had 8 years to prepare for it or 7 years to prepare for it.
It does. It's kind of, it doesn't lessen it, but it's kind of, sometimes it's the difference between how well you handle it or how well you don't.
Right.
I think that's the biggest thing. The slow loss is what I have experienced mostly in my life as well. So, you know, sometimes I wonder if like just ripping the Band-Aid off would have been better, but also, well, our
I shook my head. I mean, I'm sure hardly anyone will see the two of us. I think most people listen to podcasts, but I was shaking my head. merely to say, I don't think there's any right. I mean, we're all plague ourselves with the what ifs.
Sure.
And in your case, it's what if I had ripped the bandage off quickly? And I shook my head, not to say that you would have had any particular different outcome. I don't know what it would have felt
Mhm.
like to you. What I was shaking my head about was
Not for
this
you guys.
desire, the way we plague ourselves with the what ifs. And
Yeah.
there's no answer to that. What
There's
happened
not.
is what happened.
Hmm.
So sorry. I mean, I didn't want to make it look like I was like disagreeing with you, as in,
No,
what
you're
if you?
right. There
Yeah,
is no right answer. It's just
yeah,
what happens, whatever cards we get dealt are the cards that we get dealt, and we
yes,
just have to kind of figure it out from there. But it can be, t coming back to what something you said earlier, uh, liberating. So even though it's terrifying and it's dark and it's heavy, um, in a way, that dark, heavy, terrifying overloom is always there over all of us anyway. We just don't
yes.
realize it. We don't have like the quote unquote definitive, because even though you guys had the definitive um, diagnosis, they gave you 6 months to a year and you got 8.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we don't know. Any one of us could be in a car accident tomorrow or get that same diagnosis tomorrow. Everything's normal today and everything's completely changed tomorrow. But if we took a little bit of time to just recognize that that's something that we're all eventually going to have to deal with in some way, form, or another, it becomes really liberating to enjoy your life, your time that you have now. And suddenly things really fall into perspective of what actually matters and what doesn't. And we become so much freer in ourselves, in our bodies, in our relationships, in our lives, and we find happiness, and we no longer care about what that person has or thinks or wants us to do. Or there's so many things where so many of us are living our lives in accordance to what's expected of us
Mm-hmm.
per society, per culture, and family, and just all of the things. And a lot of us, we can spend our whole life living as a people pleaser that's depressed on the inside, but, putting on the show for everyone. Uh, and then
Yep.
wake up in our 40s and be like, well, crap.
Yes. I completely agree with everything you just said. It certainly happened to me and to Lynn. I look back on the years after her diagnosis. Okay, the first part of it was pretty horrible because of physical things, because the cancer had attacked her spine. She needed intensive radiation. Then it to stop from being paralyzed. That was in the first 2 weeks.
Mm.
And then there were various other twists and turns, and as I said, I think an operation that went wrong and led to infection and all these horrible things. But in between those, we were having exactly the kind of experiences you're talking about. And even in that horrible first 2 years, when there's a point in the book, it's actually one of my favorite, it's almost like a little cliffhanger at the end of a paragraph. It's like things are going well, and Lynn and I think that we'll have 3 months, 6 months, at least a few months before things start to go wrong again. It never occurs to us that we'll only have 2 weeks. And then you turn the page to the next chapter and you find out what started to go wrong in the next 2 weeks later. But guess what? Those 2 weeks, which I don't actually describe in the book, although I do describe others, those 2 weeks were wonderful. Because once you've realized how close you are to the edge, and once, in her case, you've defeated the things that are causing you pain and keeping you in bed, and been able to get a portion of your life back. And actually, I want to riff on that for a second, too. But once you've been able to get that back, you really appreciate it. It's like a truism or a cliche, but it's totally true. The part I want to riff on is we never got our whole life back.
Sure.
What happened, and I think it's very common, is, and it happens with aging. In some ways, a lot of what you can say about having cancer, not counting the specific operations and the drugs and things, is like accelerated aging. The things you think are going to happen to you in 20 years or that you're going to not be able to do anymore, guess what? You can't do them anymore now or next year because Lynn's body was being impacted. We couldn't travel. We used to travel a lot. And now she never wanted to be more than an hour away from her doctors. So the traveling consisted of going from New York City, where I am, where we were, to New Jersey, where we rented a summer house, and back and forth. That was an hour and a half drive. That's as far as she was willing to go. And these things that had seemed so important to our lives, going to India and Asia, as we did many times, and other things where we had these fantastic experiences, guess what? We didn't miss them
Mhm.
because she was alive. We had each other. We could enjoy the day. We could enjoy the beauty of the day, or whatever nice thing happened, or this conversation with our friend, or petting the cat.
Mhm.
And that lasted even right into hospice, where she basically, at the end of it, couldn't get out of bed. Last few days, just before dying, a person who's dying in the sort of a natural way, as she did, turns in on themselves, stops moving much, etc. But just until almost those last few days, we were still having little conversations. And she did say to me once, when she was only going to live another week, she said, I don't want to go yet. It was very sad. I mean, my God, I started crying. But she was enjoying her life, even when what was left of her life was this tiny fragment of
Mhm.
what it had been 5 or 10 years earlier. Still, she wasn't in serious pain. I was with her. The cats were with her. Our bedroom has a beautiful view out the windows of the sky. I mean, when you're lying in bed, you see the sky. You don't see what you would see if you were standing at the window. And it was full of light and air and love. And that was the last few days. But that progression of starting with your whole life and then having it narrow down and more of it gets taken away, where when you're younger and healthier, you start thinking, oh, if that happened to me, I'd commit suicide. I mean, what the hell? I wouldn't have any life left. It turns out that when it actually happens to you, I would say, unless you're in terrible pain or some other thing which would change the equation, when this sort of constriction, narrowing down happens to you, you're still enjoying what you've got. In
Mhm.
fact, you enjoy it more than you did before.
Mhm.
At least we
There,
did.
there's a surrender and an acceptance that, a letting go. Uh,
Hmm.
a lot of people can't find like, and that's the thing is like, coming back to the mental health aspect of just
Yes.
life, just regular people living life. It doesn't have to take these big things to put things in perspective for you. You can realize that you're, um, chasing things. A lot of people were like, well, I'll be happy when XYZ. I'll be happy when I get this amount
When
of money, when I get that job, when
that's
I
such
go
an
to,
illusion.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And that's what's keeping, most of us, that's what's keeping us not happy is that we
Hmm.
tied conditions to our happiness. But if we can learn how to let go of all of that and just kind of allow the free fall of life, because that's all it is.
Yes.
It's an illusion of control. None of us have control over any of this. We're all just doing our best as we free fall, and that's really all you can do. And if you learn how to ride the free fall a little bit instead of struggling and fighting against it, like waves in an ocean, you
Well,
have to ride
absolutely.
them. And if you fight them, you drown. So, you know,
I just,
go ahead.
I, I'm just dying to say, yeah, listening to you talking about the mental health, talking about everything you just said. This is why I wrote Carrying the Tiger. This is the reason I wrote this book was not to say it the way you just said it, but rather to tell the story of how that's exactly what happened to us.
Mhm.
There's I tried to just fill the book with the details of the things that made me feel guilty, the things that we were embarrassed about, the things that we were ashamed about at first, and how just by living, we learned not to feel guilty, not to keep it in. I mean, these are complicated stories. I had a mini breakdown a year in because I was trying too hard to hold everything together and take care
Yeah.
of Lynn while I still had a full time job. And I wasn't sharing with her the inner anguish, like maybe it would be better if she died sooner rather than later. I'm
Mhm.
walking around with that thought in my head, not every minute, and I'm supporting Lynn, and she's telling me during that year that she's afraid that my having to work so hard to support her is going to break us apart, is going to push me away from her. And I'm having thoughts in my head like maybe it would be better if she did die sooner rather than later. Or, God, I really wish being able to have sex the way we used to, which the physical changes changed our sex life considerably. And for a year, I didn't share them with her or anyone. This is before I had a therapist. And then I had a breakdown, sobbing, in which I admitted to her that I just couldn't do this anymore. And I told her these kinds of things. We were sobbing on the bed. We had come back from an appointment with our coats still on. And I just fell down and said, I can't do this anymore. And instead of pushing her away, she actually pulled me to her and touched her forehead to mine and said, I understand. Really, I do. And then she encouraged me to get a therapist, among other things. It wasn't the next sentence. But the book is full of that kind of thing, the diarrhea in a public place, the twists and turns of the treatment, the hospice, all of that. What I want, and then my grief and my anguish and the complexity of the new love, all of that. What I wanted to do was take you on a journey where you would just look over my shoulder while all these things happened to me. And then you draw your own conclusions, but you'd see for yourself that just as it happened, we lived those years more or less the way you're talking. I look back on those years, and yes, there were wrong decisions we made. And yes, there were times when, like having that breakdown, like I should have gotten help a year earlier. And, we went down some path and it didn't work out for us so well. A lot more than just these examples. But at the end of the day, when I look back, this was an example of all that you can gain by accepting that this is reality and not being embarrassed, not being ashamed, not holding it in, letting your feelings out, letting your friends know. There are so many examples in there where I put up posts that would reveal something where had been really afraid to reveal it. And the first time I ever told everyone that it felt like slogging through a swamp and that we were depressed. And that was really my whole post. I had nothing else to say.
Mm-hmm.
I almost didn't press publish on the post because I had never been that gloomy. And I was afraid of pushing my friends away.
Yeah.
And instead, we get these wonderful comments back. Thank you for sharing. Having cancer isn't just good news. I'm really glad to know what's really going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it brought everyone closer. So I filled the book with these kinds of examples because they actually happened to us, hoping that when you finish the book, you will have appreciated exactly everything that you, Savannah, were just saying 2 minutes ago about being open and to the reality and to the joys and the frustrations and just living,
Yeah, just allowing yourself to be human, which is
allowing yourself to be human.
equal parts. I don't like the words good and bad.
Right.
Everything's just everything just is,
Yep.
it's helpful or unhelpful, it's pleasant or unpleasant, but it's not inherently good or bad. It's just experiences.
Yes.
And unfortunately, most of the time we need the miserable type of experiences in order to find the happiness.
In order to break out of the shell that we normally encase ourselves in.
Yeah.
That phrase just occurred to me that second. It may not be the most profound thing ever said, but yeah, this is like cracking the shell around me
Hmm.
that, the protective shell, the self-protective shell that I had moved through life in
Hmm.
and letting more in and out.
Everybody does because, our society and culture has historically not, we don't talk about emotions. We don't talk
Hmm.
about feelings.
Yeah.
We're not emotionally available. We're not an inherently emotionally available culture. But to be fair, I don't think that many cultures really are or have
Hmm.
been historically,
Hmm.
uh, because we didn't really have time to be.
That
So.
makes sense. Yeah.
It just all gets pushed down because we don't have time, we don't have the capacity, we have to work, we have to eat, we have to feed everybody, we have to take care of everybody. And so we're really just now getting to a point in time in history where most of everybody's basic needs, not everybody by any
Not
means,
every, yeah, no, but I get you. Yeah.
And then now, so now it's Maslow's pyramid. Are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yes, yes, with the yes, I am, but you can remind me because I've seen it and I remember the different levels of need but go ahead.
Yeah, the foundation, the bottom part is just your basic needs, safety and security, food and water, shelter. And for most of history, that's nobody could get past that. It took
Right.
everything they had just to not drown and fall out of that category.
Hmm.
But you can't move on up to the fulfillment and purpose and self-actuality until you get those basic needs met. So historically, we didn't have time for emotions. So trauma, 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 and zero
Yeah.
processing, just
Hmm.
taking it all in and storing it in the body and lashing out and then perpetuating and then the cycles and
And if you think about it, for a variety of reasons, I never really related it to trauma. It's more of the usual physical reasons. People died 35, 40, 45 years old. I mean, 45 was an old person for
yeah, it was.
most of human history.
Yeah. And we're just like I I don't think we're not actually adults until like 32.
Just to pick a number. Yeah, I
Well,
remember. Yeah.
I'm 30. I'll be 34 next month. So I only just started feeling like an adult. And
Well,
everybody I talk to feels the same way.
I would say sometime in my 30s. Yeah, definitely not your 20s. Definitely
No,
not my 20s.
no.
But I will say it has continued. But then eventually, now I'm in my 60s now, and I'm in the reverse sort of pattern of not hanging on. Like, I'm really proud that soon I'll be 70. It's like amazing to me. And it means that I've had all these experiences. But I'm also really happy that I'm still carrying around this core of youthfulness in me.
Yeah.
First you're aspiring to understand the world and live in the world and be an adult in the world. And then comes but I want to hang on to that youthful stuff because there's a real danger that you're going to let go of it. I don't mean you personally. I
No,
think
I
you're
agree.
doing great stuff, but
I agree entirely. I've always said that age is a mindset, and you can choose to be as young as you want to be
hmm
in your mental, emotional, internal world. And we're just gonna like, we put too much attachment on the physical body. Uh,
hmm
Thanks Hollywood and stuff,
Yep.
but the physical body is going to morph. It's going to
hmm
shift. You're going to look different all of the time. I always laugh about how my husband, he looks completely different, like a completely different person every single year. You can put pictures of him beside each other and you nearly can't even recognize him. He looks so
Wow.
different for who knows how. Um, I look the exact same as I did when I was like 5, more or less. Anybody who's ever like you can recognize me. You're
Which
not gonna
for many people, but obviously not you, reinforces the illusion that we're not changing, so that when we do change, it's a
Sure.
tragedy.
Yes. Yes. But attaching that, because people are always chasing weight loss and
Hmm.
that's the big one. And then like, plastic surgery,
Oh.
Botox, there's all sorts of things that people are chasing and no matter like it may help temporarily,
Hmm.
but I have found incredible happiness and peace and fulfillment and just like all the things I've always actually been looking for once I completely let go of caring at all what I look like physically. And I don't mean
Yes.
like let yourself go. I work
You
out
want to be healthy. I'm
daily.
sure you're doing things to get some
Yeah.
exercise, eat well, all the things one does to feel good in your
Yes.
body.
Because that's all that really matters is how you feel. So who cares how your body looks on the outside? It's how well you're taking care of it
Yeah.
on the inside. It's all the mechanical stuff.
You just reminded me of one of my favorite quotes. I attended a conference on happiness, an online conference. Actually, it was just a few months after Lynn died, while I was grieving, and I was trying to figure out, is it possible to have joy and grief at the same time? Which it turns out it totally is. I lived it.
Yes, absolutely.
And in the conference, I learned that happiness and unhappiness literally neurologically live in different parts of your brain, and that therefore you can simultaneously have a lot of happiness and a lot of unhappiness because they're living in different parts of your brain, which was really cool to learn. It's an illusion that it's an either or.
Yes.
But during that conference, Deepak Chopra spoke, and the one thing I took away is happiness is chasing you. You just have to slow down and let it catch you.
Yeah. I like that.
I've been living with that ever since. Like, stop chasing these things that you think will make you happy, which in this part of our conversation, you were talking about your body and looks and stuff.
Just as
Way
present.
earlier, you said something about it that I also agree with about, accomplishments.
Mhm.
These things will not make you happy. They
Nope.
may get you more money. They may make you more secure in your life. They may do all kinds of things. They may make you a little less unhappy,
Hmm.
but they won't make you happy. And the happiness comes from stopping, and it's there. It's there if you stop chasing all these things and let it catch up with you.
Yes, that's the magic behind meditation and mindfulness is just the
Hmm.
slowing down because again our culture and society we can make a drinking game out of how many times I say culture and society in every episode, but always drink responsibly. Uh
Hmm.
the hustle culture, we've been programmed to achieve, produce, be, productive. And so a lot of us have tied our self-worth to how much we're able to do and produce. But in doing and producing, we lose sight of our relationships and our health. There's nothing on this planet more important than our health and our relationships.
Yes. And they're
So,
the two things that will most give you happiness.
yes, and you don't need any of the extra stuff to cultivate them,
Hmm.
just put your phone down and pay attention to the person in front of you.
Yeah.
That's
Do you know, I
literally,
I realized the other day. First of all, I have been reading a lot of Thich Nhat Hanh, who I think is a wonderful Buddhist monk writing on mindfulness. He, more than anyone, he's the person who popularized that term and the concept in this country, as I understand it. A lot
okay.
of other people since then. But I was thinking how, in order to, get the word out about carrying the tiger, I've done several of these podcast interview conversations, long form, really fun conversations. And it occurred to me one day that when I am in a conversation like this, I am much more present than
Mhm.
I am in my normal life or when I'm just chatting with a friend.
Mhm.
It's like this focus, it's really being here. And I'm not trying to brag. I'm just saying, in order to have this conversation, I'm looking right at you, I'm listening to what you say, I'm not thinking about anything else. And at the end, I feel great
Mhm.
because I've really been present for 45 minutes or an hour or however long the conversation lasts.
Mhm.
Whereas in my normal day, if I'm sitting there talking to my girlfriend or a friend, my mind will wander 30, 40, 50 times
Mhm.
by the end of that hour. And it's not as satisfying when I let that happen.
Yeah. And to be fair though, podcasting is a little bit of a cheat code because we're still producing, so it bypasses our
Oh, yeah, we are. We absolutely are. You've got an episode to produce. I've got a book to publicize.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
productive.
Yeah.
It's
And
productive,
yet,
but it's also
I have genuinely, I mean, I was not looking forward to going on, quote, the podcast circuit. I thought,
Mm.
oh my gosh, I've got to remember to say all these cool things about my book and what's the point I want to make, blah, blah, blah. And I was nervous about it.
It's
And
intimidating.
once I,
Can
what?
be. It can be intimidating.
Yeah. And instead, I have enjoyed it so much that I signed up for that grief education course after the third or fourth one. I mean, it only happens once a year, that particular course. And it just happened that I saw something saying, oh, last chance, it starts next week. But it was because of these conversations that I realized that this is something I wanted to do, which would never have occurred to me.
Mm.
You started a podcast to try and change the world in a small way, in your small way, make the world a better place. I mean, I know those are bigger words than you might use for your own podcast.
Well, no, the funny thing is that when I first started it, that's exactly what I thought I was trying to do was
Hmm.
I just read a lot of books and was like, I couldn't find any people in my real life world that could
Mm-hmm.
really hang with me on these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, for one, obviously people don't know about any of this.
Right.
So I need to so I always refer back to this story of I was driving down the road one day and there was a turtle in the middle of the road.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kept going and I was like, man, I hope somebody stops and helps that turtle, or I hope that turtle gets across the road before it gets hit. And then I was like, well, shit, I guess I'm a person who could do
Yep.
that. So that's
Yep.
kind of how I got started. But now
Yep.
that we're like so many years into it, it's like, wow, I think actually I was being really selfish to start this. Like it's both. It's both.
Mm.
As duality exists in all things. But
Yes.
it's been a solid source of therapy and coping for myself,
Mm-hmm.
exploring these topics with other individuals who understand the topic and can help not only me find ways to get through whatever's going on, but to motivate and inspire other people who may feel hopeless. Like there is hope. There's always
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah. Now this is when I so I started writing the book because people in their comments on Caring Bridge said your words are helping me,
Mm,
which was deeply meaningful.
sure. Yes.
So I thought, okay, this was several years after Lynn had died. I want to say that like I couldn't do this the first few years. I tried like 6 months after she died, and I couldn't do it. Too emotional, you
Yeah.
know, revisiting all of that. Printed out all of Caring Bridge, 700 pages, my thing, and put it in a box and ignored it for like 4 years. But I started this process, and I thought, oh, okay, I'll like edit the posts and I'll create a little thing with a spiral binding that I could get printed at the copy shop across the street, and I can make a PDF and I can distribute it to my friends. And then I started to think, no, actually, maybe this could help more people, but they're not going to read it in that form. And so I did another pass, it got bigger. And then let some people read it, and they basically said, wow, Tony, there is stuff in here that's really helpful, but this, that, and the other. So I went back and did another pass through it and getting more and more invested in it, still thinking, okay, this is a book to change other people. I don't mean change. Actually, that's way too grandiose. To help other people by sharing what we went through. The stuff I said before, sharing the details of what Lynn and I went through in hopes that you can see it and have your own ideas about it and maybe be better prepared or better understand when stuff like that happens to you. But I totally didn't anticipate that the process, by the time we get to now, would be changing me.
Hmm.
I certainly didn't set out to be any kind of educator on any of this stuff. I set out to write the story because I knew this was really interesting. The arc of the story is really interesting, and the fact that new love came into my life makes it like a fun book to read in a way where it wouldn't be otherwise if it just ended with death and sadness,
Hmm.
even though that is life. But real life includes you're still alive, you keep going, stuff is going to happen to you, and that makes it more of the real journey of life.
Hmm.
But I still thought I'm just sharing my little journey, and people are going to draw some conclusions from it.
Hmm.
And then I go and I start trying to talk about the book, thinking I'm publicizing the book, but people want to talk to me for real.
Hmm.
What did this mean to you? And so I have to start thinking, well, what did this mean to you?
Hmm.
And before you know it, I'm thinking, this is really cool. This is exciting to be able to share with people what grief or cancer or whatever felt like to me is actually really satisfying. And I had no idea what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And I still don't really.
No, no,
But
mister.
no, I mean, who does? But, I'm taking this 3 month course. There's 1,000 people from all over the world logging into this course. It's the real deal. And at the end of that, I will be a quote certified grief educator, which doesn't, I have no idea what that means. I don't, it's just like, okay, I'm going to have this nice little tiny certificate, but I will know that much more and I'll be that much more knowledgeable when I talk about what happened to me to be able to put it into a bigger context and hopefully help more people. And
Yeah.
helping people turns out to be really satisfying.
Yes, Absolutely. And I wish that more people understood that. But
Yeah.
I'm glad that you didn't end the book with her death and that you because that's where a lot of people get stuck. You know, they have
Hmm.
this thing that happens in their life and then they don't know how to move on from there. So I'm glad that you were able to tell people how you moved on from there and
Yes.
kept on keeping on the best you could and how, no, it's not all sunshine and roses no matter what you do, but
Nope.
it it can get better. It will get better. Tell me about the title because the title is very
Oh,
powerful.
oh, well, thank you. So about a month in, very back at the beginning, a friend wrote Lynn an email. She didn't put this on Caring Bridge. She presumably had heard about all of this from Caring Bridge. And she said, I'm so sorry to hear what you're going through. In my Tai Chi group, we carry a tiger to help people who are facing difficult challenges. The three motions of bending low, picking up the tiger, and putting it on a hilltop far away relieve the person of the burden because a tiger is not so scary when it's far away and small on a hilltop. And Lynn wrote back saying, wow, that's wonderful. Could you carry some tigers for me? And would you teach me how to carry tigers? I put that in the book right away without realizing what a great title it was. That anecdote sat in the book and was one of my favorite pages of the book for like 9 months or 12 months. Meanwhile, I had a sheet of paper going, or, on my computer, where I just kept trying out titles. And they were all like love and loss and caregiving, a caregiver's journey. I mean, all of these things. And I just like, oh my God, these suck. And no, I don't like them. I wouldn't read this book. Why would anyone else? And then one day last summer, I was out riding my bike in Acadia National Park in Maine, which is one of the world's most beautiful and fun places to ride a bike. And it just suddenly hit me. I mean, I wasn't thinking about you know how these things, like when you're in the shower and you have an idea out of nowhere? I totally was not thinking about my title. And I just had to slap my head and I called out to Cordelia, my girlfriend who was on the other bike. Oh my God, I've got the title. And it had been sitting in the book the whole time.
Hmm.
But
It's that's
that's
how
it.
it happens. I love Eastern culture stuff. I've always been a little obsessed with it. There's this one spiritual symbol. It's like a spiral and then a line. I don't remember what it's called, and I don't have any other way to tell you about it. But I love how the spiral is like the more you go and you're trying to figure out the answers and the whatever they are, the more you find them as they reveal themselves, you find that you already knew them. They're already
Mm,
there, and it's that whole like all of the answers are within you.
yes.
They're
Yeah.
so cliche, but like when you start like getting into it, it's like, oh, okay, I get it.
And the story that I just told is an exact
Yep.
metaphor for, I don't know which is the metaphor for the other. It's an example for which that is the metaphor.
Yes,
It was exactly like that.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for all of this. This has been a really good time.
You're very
I
welcome, and it has for me too.
will link where they can get the book down low. Do you want to tell them? Oh, is you have a web? You do have a
Oh, I've
web.
got all of that. First of all, the book is widely available pretty much anywhere Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, bookstore.com, and it's available as an ebook, an audio book, as well as print. So Audible, Spotify, places like that for the audiobook. And I do have a website. I, I'm pleased to say I built it myself, that it is not an amateurish website. It is somewhere in the middle, but I've spent months and months over the last year adding things to it. It is tonystewartauthor.com, and you'll learn a whole lot more about me, the book. There's just all kinds of stuff there. There's videos where I talk about the book. These are the same videos that I'm now going to be posting on social media now and then, to publicize it. But I made a whole set of little videos of me talking about the book, and there's a photo gallery of Lynn and me together and stuff like that. So if you're curious, tonystewartauthor.com. If you'd like to just run out and go to Amazon and click the buy button, I wouldn't object to that either.
Sure. And your website is really nice. I I created my own also, and it's something I've always had a website since like
Hmm.
um gosh, 2010 probably, and I've always DIY'd all of it. So I get really antsy on websites that are poorly done.
Hmm.
And yours is great. I have no
Oh,
complaints.
thank you. I'm really glad to hear that because I don't get people giving me feedback about the cover of the book and stuff many times, but no one gives me feedback about the website. And I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah,
So many hundreds of hours go into something like that over time.
understand. Yes, absolutely it does. It looks great. You've done a great job. It's not
Thank
easy.
you.
It is easy, so, but it's also not easy. It just you got to be the person for it, you know.
Hmm.
Not everybody can do stuff like that. But
No, no.
all right.
Years ago, I was a filmmaker, and some of this, it's like
Oh,
reviving some of the those skills and abilities in a different form. Some of
right.
that love.
We're all artists, and
Yeah,
websites are a work of art, a self-expression,
absolutely.
just like your book is, just like movies are, just like music, just like
Hmm.
paintings,
And just like a podcast
just like a
conversation.
podcast conversation. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. We'll let everybody go.